Join me for a conversation with game designer and novelist Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. I am on a quest to make game masters' lives easier and to help role players everywhere level up their games. Also, on my website at dicegeeks.com, you will see that I write resource books that help game masters cut down their prep time and have more fun at the table. You can also find my books on Amazon.com and DriveThruRPG.com. Just search for Dice Geeks, all one word, or just type in the Book of Random Tables. All my stuff should come up. Now, I really have a great interview today, so let's just go ahead and jump in. My guest today is game designer and writer Gareth Ryder-Hanrahan. Gareth, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. When did you first play tabletop role-playing games?
The first game I played would have been somewhere around 1989, I think. I had no idea what role-playing games were, but the local library was doing a Tolkien week. And as part of that, they had some of the local gamers running a game of Middle-earth role-playing. And I came in. There would always be around a table in the library with little Prince August miniatures and strange sheets of paper and odd dice and so forth. I had no idea what it was, but they said, who wants to join? I just took my hand. They gave me a character of an elf who was passed through Moria. I thought, okay, I don't know what this is, but it's the best thing ever. So I played that one game and then spent the next year trying to work out exactly what I had done, what that game was. No one said this is a role-playing game or this is Middle-earth role-playing. So I go to bookstores looking for things like the game I had played, and I got this ridiculously complicated Middle-earth war game and tried to make that work as a role-playing game. And then finally discovered that there was role-playing games, like Dungeons & Dragons was one of those. So I grabbed that and went on from there.
I know sometimes the terms of role-playing games can be a little confusing when you're first being introduced to them.
Yeah, and of course, this is all pre-internet. I mean, there was one thing we've absolutely lost these days is this sort of magical confusion where you've vaguely heard of a thing but have no idea how to find it and can't just search on your magic box.
Yeah, that is interesting because now you could just type in something and probably get an exact answer. But yeah, I absolutely remember those days where we had to, we just wondered if something was true for a long time until we could figure it out. I remember
going through old TSR catalogs and all the rumors of strange books, always with titles, what could be in that?
So then you found Dungeons and Dragons. Did you kind of branch out from there and play other games as well?
Yeah, we played D&D for several years, and then I went to a convention and discovered Call of Cthulhu and started playing that for a while. And then, as was the style at the time, we got into playing Vampire. And after that, when I went to university and joined the gaming group, there was explosion of different games, and we bounced around. We did a lot of Legends of the Five Rings and got involved in things like playtesting the second edition of Novelist, and kept going from there.
Were you primarily a player, or did you begin running games?
No, because I was the one of my friends who discovered these role playing things in the first place. I was the designated GM for many, many years. It's always a situation I'm more comfortable in. Anyway, I like playing God.
Okay, well, there's that. It does seem that if you are the first person in your group of friends to discover role-playing games, it does seem that person kind of becomes the game master forever.
Yeah, or certainly sort of the default GM. Like, like my friend Richard ran most of our vampire sessions, but for a lot of it, I was like, this sort of designated GM for most games.
So running so many different games, obviously a lot of the people that listen to my podcast are game masters, and they're wanting to improve how they run sessions and how they run their campaigns. Just like off the top, what would be like your number one key piece of advice for somebody who is about ready to run a session or a campaign?
Chase player enthusiasm. If the player shows an interest in something, then leap on that, make that more of the part of the game. So if the players really resonate with a particular non-player character who's just like a minor throwaway character, then find a way to bring that character back. If a player shows little interest in your epic plot but really wants to become the lord of that castle on the hill there, then connect that castle on the hill to your epic plot. Anything you can do that either the player's interested in, follow up on instantly, or certainly very, very promptly. So you chase the balls they throw.
I think that's great advice, because then you will always be assured that your players are kind of actively involved in what's happening. I guess, what would you say if you said, you have this great epic plot and they're interested in becoming the lord of this castle? What if they're not interested in your epic plot and they want to rob a bank or something like that?
Well, do they all want to rob a bank, or is just one player who wants to rob a bank? Because there's often one player who wants to sort of test the boundaries and poke at things, and often they're just sort of testing the bars of their cage, so to speak, and seeing how far they can push you. If it's the whole group who wants to go robbing banks, then your player's obviously in the mood for a heist game, and you need to sort of change things around. So much of a game is just communication, is working out what the players want and what they're in the mood for. Mm-hmm. Because it's never fun to if the GM has this grand vision of some epic quest in mind, and the players are in the mood for something much more low key, or if the GM wants to do this really intrigue and role playing heavy game, and the players just want to relax and hit things. It has to be a collaborative game with where everyone's involved, everyone's getting something out of it. So you have to find where the common ground is.
There seems to be a lot of discussion around how different game masters prepare for sessions. How do you prepare for a session? Do you actually write out things, or do you just kind of improvise? How do you approach that?
See, half the time I'm running stuff for playtesting, or running things that I've written with publications. So it's giant wad of text. Mm-hmm. If I'm just running something off the cuff myself, then I just a one page of paper with key events of the session I want to hit, a couple of exciting incidents I can throw in if things start dragging, one or two, one note per character on stuff I want to do with that particular player, maybe some stats and a list of names. One thing I always fall down on.
After every NPC or goblin or anything is named Bob, you usually find out you need a list of names.
Yeah.
Thank you for that advice there, and that is good to know. But we do kind of focus on game masters a lot. What would be some advice for a player? What do you think a player can do to kind of up their game?
The more they sort of take off the GM's plate, the better. These days, most game groups I suspect have their own little mailing list / WhatsApp group / Discord / whatever. Keeping session notes is a huge thing. I think it keeps the game fresh in people's minds between games, so people aren't spend the first half hour catching up on what happened last week. Anything that basically sort of increases the player's interest and involvement in the game. Yeah, come up with things they want to do in the game, and work out with the GM, so how that can be introduced smoothly, as opposed to springing it on the GM in the middle of the game.
Okay.
If this is the issue with role-play advice, 95% of it comes down to just talk to each other and communicate.
Anything a player can do to take something off of the game master's plate is a huge deal, and those become the game master's almost like favorite players, because anything that they can do to keep that off. And I do especially enjoy when we get back for a session and a player can just recap what happened last time or knows, NPC names and things from last time because they just wrote them down in their notes. That is just so helpful.
Well, yeah, I have some players who will take proper notes, and I was probably sort of like stealing their character sheets after the session to sort of check out, like, what do they call that character?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes I'm surprised because I've totally forgotten what happened, and they've written down something, and so that is always very helpful.
Now, the most embarrassing thing ever, of course, is when you in one session you drop some fantastic hint which they write down, and then you forget it.
Yeah.
So 3 sessions time, they go, aha, but does he have a red jewel in his forehead? And they're going, I mentioned a red jewel 3 sessions ago. I knew what it meant back then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, that's certainly happened to me as well, that it's somebody at the table will just pull out something and I'm like, wait, what was that? And they was like, a year ago, you said this thing about this one character. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. But it sounds great. I'm glad I thought of it. Let's kind of run with it.
That is actually one reason I quite like running pre-published campaigns and so forth, just because there's so many notes there already that if I do throw something in, I can I'll probably have some context for remembering it, as opposed to just trying to remember what I ad-libbed to the spot last session.
I think you had mentioned it, but you had started playing role-playing games, but then somewhere along the line, it became your career. Now, that wasn't kind of your plan initially, was it?
No. I went to the local university and joined the game group there, and we run a convention every year called WarpCon, and I got into writing games for WarpCon. And the Irish convention system back in the day had a slightly odd system where if you're playing a Call of Cthulhu game, then one person would write up the Call of Cthulhu scenario, and then a bunch of GMs would run that. So I would write Cthulhu for the con, and there might be 18 tables of Cthulhu all running my scenario, which really encouraged you to write detailed, almost semi-professional scenarios for the convention. So because I wrote so many of those, I got fairly good at writing up scenarios that other people could take and run on the fly. So then when the internet happened, I started sending these scenarios to various companies whose games I'd written stuff for. So I sent a couple of Blue Planet convention scenarios to the Biohazard Games, and they came back to me and went, "Oh, do you want to do some freelancing for us?" And I thought, yeah, sure, I'll freelance on the side and write on the side and get a real job somewhere. And it turns out real jobs are really boring, and actual work involving computer programming, which I wasn't very good at.
Oh no.
And the job I had vanished, but I had enough freelance work to keep going for a bit. So I thought I'll try this until I run out of money, and I haven't run out of money yet. So it wasn't actually planned, but
now, so if somebody's out there and they want to write for a game company, would you suggest to kind of do like what you did, send them some scenarios they wrote or something for a convention or something like that?
No. I mean, yes, it was a great foot to the door for me, but that was more than 20 years ago at this point, and things have changed so much. I mean, these days with self-publishing and print on demand and a far, far greater acceptance of sort of small press indie stuff, you'd be far better off writing your own game, building an audience for that, and then attracting the attention of other companies based on your publication history and your credits that way. I mean, if there's a game you really, really love and you want to write for that particular game, then yeah, I mean, doing demo scenarios, helping out getting the mailing list is a solid way to publication. But if you're interested in writing as a career, it's probably a lot easier to self-publish something and build up your own fan base as opposed to doing what I did back in the day, so the wandering freelancer thing, where I freelanced for lots and lots of companies, because that style of freelancing is pretty much gone these days, or certainly much reduced. I mean, that the whole sort of writing lots and lots of sort of small stuff has kind of slipped into the realm of the DM's Guild and the other things on drive-through where you can write for Cthulhu or D&D and get paid a small amount of money for that.
No, and that is interesting to hear you say that. I mean, obviously that's the path that I've taken as well, just starting to self-publish my own things. I guess maybe just generally, how do you feel about kind of the self-publishing revolution?
It's a huge sea change to where the industry used to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's wonderful. It's it's wonderful, but it's very, very fragmenting. Like, there's so many games these days, and so many gaming subcultures that it's hard to keep track of. What's new and hot, what's going on. And it's with this whole other change now with Twitch and streaming play and so forth, where you have GMs and players as celebrities, which sort of took me completely by surprise. And I wasn't really paying attention to that whole sphere. And suddenly, Critical Role is the biggest thing ever. And they're going, I didn't get that memo. Where did that come from?
Yeah, me either.
Yeah. I mean, the industry has seen 3 absolute sea changes at least since I started being involved with it, possibly 4. Because there was the whole OGL licensing thing, which changed everything for a while. Mm-hmm. There was the whole post-Forge self-publishing explosion. There's the current thing with DM's Guild and so forth, where the biggest games are now semi-open source, but it's not the OGL. There's a clear channel through drive-through where you have both writers and customers in the same space, mm-hmm. and you have the whole streaming thing as well.
Yeah.
So one has to sort of stay faintly agile, because things are always changing.
I think that's what you can only count on, right? Is that it's something's going to change. Yeah, I just find it interesting too, because sometimes I'll hear people say, things like, submit a query letter or send things like this. And I'm just kind of like, that seems like that was kind of stuff when I was in college in the 90s or something, that would have been,
Yeah, I think that there's a weird quasi-nostalgia to role-playing, because I suspect we sort of venerate D&D, and it is, to this day, the sort of the central pillar of the industry. Mm-hmm. And there's the whole there's a whole culture around that has continuity all the way back to the mid-70s and so forth. Mm-hmm. So we have all these sort of traditions embedded in the industry, or that at this point have become almost sort of folk traditions or power cult things. The feeling that there are ways things should be done that haven't really been around for a long time, but people still talk about them. I'm not sure if it makes any sense there, but there's a difference sort of.
It's either kind of a nostalgic, or just getting information that's out of date, or I don't know, kind of hoping for maybe kind of a maybe some type of structure behind, or like a solid career path or something like that, when there really isn't one.
No, there isn't. Or what worked 10 years ago isn't what worked 20 years ago, isn't what worked 30 years ago.
Yeah.
For example, I actually just saw this discussion online there about people saying the core to success in the industry is after dinner drinks at Gen Con, because that was where people used to meet and form connections, and how one would sort of finagle their way to the next freelancing thing. And that was definitely true at one point. But these days there are other channels, hanging out on Twitter is also a solid way to sort of make connections and get yourself on the radar of certain people.
I guess it's just the nature of the kind of our internet world. Everything just changes so fast that you have the ability now to get in touch with people through a number of different channels, right? You can get in touch with them through Twitter. If you start streaming, somebody at some company might watch you play their game. I mean, you just never know kind of like what's going to put you in touch there. I think too, one thing that I learned that I maybe 20-ish years ago I would have had a different idea, but like now doing these interviews on the podcast and talking to people who work at companies and things, you find out that a lot of role-playing game companies only have 1, 2, 3 people that work there, and that some of the other people that work with them are people that they have, specifically contracted to write something. And there is only like 2 employees at the whole company.
That's true of pretty much every company, bar 3 or 4.
And that does kind of lead me into something I was going to ask you about. How did you kind of start doing a lot of work with Pelgrane Press?
I think, how did I actually start? I was going to basically all the UK cons, and there's a regular UK convention presence from the big UK companies, which back then were Mongoose, who I'd done stuff for, Cubicle 7, who I'd done stuff for, and Pelgrane. And when they brought out Trail of Cthulhu, I said, I've done Cthulhu stuff. I can do Cthulhu-wide things. So I did one book for them there, and because I seemed, I think, faintly reliable and affable, Simon gave me more work to do. And then at some point, I think after my friend Kat joined Pelgrane, they said, we'll bring Gareth on board too. So they did. And I said, yeah. I sort of looked at the games I was playing and the games I wanted to play as my next campaign. I went, these are pretty much all Pelgrane games. I'll move over there for a while. So they're a lovely bunch of friends to work with. So I'm having fun.
The Pelgrane Press game that I'm most familiar with, I have yet to play any at this time of recording. Anyway, I've read several of them, and I've been trying to get my group to play a couple sessions of Ashen Stars. So I've been reading Ashen Stars, and I have your supplement for Ashen Stars that you were involved in, Accretion Disc.
Yes. I also did Rock 7, which was the first adventure anthology first.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to check that out. I was just wondering, kind of, just say like with a supplement like Accretion Disc, what does that, for somebody who's on the outside, what kind of that process does that look like when it starts getting developed, kind of, and then taking it through the process of writing and stuff? What does that kind of look like?
Well, Accretion Disc is a sort of like a grab bag supplement. There's lots of different bits in there. It was, what do we actually technically call it? Like what's the player's it's sort of like a companion book or something. Mm-hmm. I think I pitched the idea back in the day, because we'd done one for Trail before that, and they'd done one for Knights Black Agents, Double Tap. Expansion book, apparently we call it. Uh-huh. Anyway, so I pitched that, and I wrote up a 2-page outline or so, which is basically just like, a list of the suggested contents and a couple of ideas for each section. So like, new races, new ships, extra uses for the abilities and so forth. That outline would then get kicked around inside Pelgrane by Robin and Kat and people and Simon, and they'd make suggestions and say what they wanted to see or didn't want to see. I'd then rewrite the outline based on that feedback. We'd work out what the word count for each section should be, very roughly, because it's always something with black art. And then we went off and found some freelancers. In the case of Accretion Disc, we had Kevin Culp, who has done other stuff before. He's just done Sword and Serpentine. And Kieran Charlie, who's a friend of mine in Ireland, who I knew had been A, playing Ashen Stars, and B, writing for Dragon. So I knew that he could turn out text that wouldn't require significant editing and development work. Mm-hmm. And sort of poked Kieran and said, why do you want to do some writing for us? And I then basically gave them their sections. We all wrote up our various bits. It was all compiled into one document. I then did a development pass where I sort of like tried to tie it all together and smooth out the writing so that it all seemed to have a pretty consistent voice. And once it was all good to go, went through playtesting and then off to the magical lands of editorial and layout.
Thank you for explaining that. I assume there's a lot of playtesting that goes into different products like that.
It depends. I mean, the most playtesting is always going to be for the core book of a line. That's sort of the one that's the bedrock for the rest of it. That's where we got the most sort of contact with the players. For something like an expansion book like that, while it was playtested, no one campaign is going to use every bit of it. It's all going to be taken in sections. It'd be very hard to sort of playtest all of that in depth. And for an adventure, adventures are really odd to playtest because what works for one group isn't going to work for a different group, and you can't really control for individual GMs. So, like, one group may completely bounce off the premise of an adventure because of the way the GM presented it, or just because of what that group's interested in. Mm-hmm. And another group will absolutely engage with it and love it. And you can't be sure in isolation if the playtest report that says we hated this, we couldn't even play it, is right, or if the one that says, oh, we love this is right. You have to sort of take them all in aggregate and work out where the commonalities are. And also for adventures, the longer the group goes through the adventure, the further they get into it, the more likely they are to deviate from the text in some fashion. So the early scenes of adventure are sort of the ones that get the most playtesting, because after that, different groups will take different decisions and things will have resolved differently. So the playtest feedback becomes less and less, not useful, but less coherent in some ways as they go on, because their games have deviated so much from other ones. It's hard to find points of commonality and reference. So what happens with playtesting then is you get playtest feedback, and unless you've sent the playtest groups a sort of specific template, for some companies do, which we do sometimes, you'll get back radically different reports. Some groups will sort of go like, oh yes, we liked it, all fine, great product, can't wait to buy. Others will nitpick on one particular thing, that's all the feedback they'll send back. Others will send these 10-page write-ups of what happened in their sessions, which, while that's interesting to read and can be lovely to sort of eager gratification, it often isn't that useful in its raw form. So the next step, once you have all the playtest feedback back, is to sort of boil it down and identify those common points. If one group says this NPC didn't work for us, you sort of go, that's one group. That's if I can tweak it, that's fine, but it's not a major issue. If 5 groups say, oh, that NPC, we had no idea what to say to him, he was very boring, then you go, okay, there's a problem with that NPC, that needs to be changed. And often, playtest feedback will include suggestions from the playtest groups, but their suggestions will often focus on the particular problem they had, whereas the actual fix needs to be more structural. So, if they're all saying, oh, this NPC is boring, then the solution may not be to fix that one NPC in particular. It might be to go back and rewrite all the NPCs to give the GMs more role-playing hooks, or adjust the premise of the adventure so there's more of an emotional tie to that NPC when they actually get to him or something. It's not just a question of obviously taking the players' feedback and implementing it.
What would a GM or a player who's playtesting something, what would be your perfect scenario for them to send you? What would be the best things that they could kind of make notes about?
Number one is, how easy was it to use? Is there bits that were confusing the text? Did anything trip you up? Did you feel a lack of anything? Would a map have been handy? Is the summary at the start of the adventure or whatever sufficient? Are the rules clear? After that, any major issues encountered in play, information on the group and the actual events of the game is useful for context, but if you play through the scenario and it all turns out as written, then I don't particularly need you to say we went to this room and this room and this room and this room, and I'll be like, everything happened pretty much as you laid out. Well done. I don't need the blow by blow of a game that matches the expected situation. You want to hear about deviations, about places where you bounced off the text as opposed to the adventurers are guided by the text. Yeah, and also told the playtesters, thank you. You make my job easier.
Thank you for kind of laying that out. That is interesting. I could see how frustrating it would be if you just get kind of a matter of fact kind of room by room or situation report when you're like, well, yeah, we've written those already. We wanted to see how it actually played, not just you went here, you went there, or something like that.
I mean, sometimes that can be like gratifying to read. Like, these people definitely did play my adventure, and they definitely went through it as expected. I got it right. I predicted what they would likely do, and I provided information to support the GM in that situation. But it's bug fixing. You want to find problems. So if it works as intended, then that's all I need to know, as opposed to a long description of it working as intended.
Now, you have kind of had your hand in many products at Pelgrane Press, as we've mentioned. What maybe are some current ones that you're working on, or something that was just finished that you can talk a little bit about?
Currently, I'm working on Gumshoe Fantasy 1-to-1, which is about half done at the moment and doesn't have an official title yet. Basically, it's taking the one player, one GM rules from Cthulhu Confidential and adapting them to a D&D-ish, generic fantasy world. So I'm writing basically 3 sample characters and an adventure for each of them. So basically there's a fighter barbarian-esque character, a wizard character, and a rogue-type character. And we have one adventure for each of those, and a set of rules for one player, one GM action in the fantasy realm. That's currently being written. I'm hoping to have a first draft of that by the end of the month, if miracles align, which they probably won't, and I hope Kat doesn't listen to this.
It'll air quite a bit later, so it'll be all right.
Yeah, that's fine. In that case, I have confidently written the entire manuscript. It's totally done, hit all my deadlines, all good.
Well, there you go.
Exactly. Just finished, or by the time this airs, finished long, long ago, was the Borellis Connection, which is a campaign for Fall Delta Green. Fall Delta Green is the Gumshoe game based on the Arc Dream Delta Green property. It's basically the 1960s spies versus the Cthulhu mythos. And the Borellis Connection is going to be a pretty gigantic campaign. It's like 10 adventures long. Along the heroin trail, so basically you bounce around the Far East for a while, then you're off to Turkey, and then you end up in Europe beating up drug dealers and the mythos horrors behind them.
That sounds great. I have recently bought Fall of Delta Green, when this airs, it'll be several months ago. I bought the Fall of Delta Green.
An indeterminate point in space-time.
Yes. And so that sounds really cool. I haven't got to read much of it yet because I have like a stack of books on my desk that I've been telling myself I need to read. But hopefully soon I will be able to look into that. That sound.
By the time this comes out, of course, you will have fully read it.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I'm enjoying this thing where we can declare our immediate futures.
Yes, yeah, and then we can listen to it and see how much we actually got right, I guess. Yeah, so hopefully, yes, I will have read it, and so that campaign sounds really interesting. That whole thing the whole concept of Fall Delta Green. I've been really thinking that is that sounds really fantastic, and I really want to try to dig into it. So that's on the role-playing game side. Now, you have done a lot of work on the role-playing game side, but you have also begun writing novels.
Indeed. I wrote one novel for Paranoia, sort of like across the streams, when they were doing Paranoia novels for a while. And that was a fantastic learning experience, and it didn't sell fantastically, but it taught me a lot about the differences between writing novels and writing game material, because it's a different mindset. And well, there are some skills that cross over. There are other skills where my sort of gaming instincts were at odds with what a novel needs to be. Like when you write an adventure, you need to open up as many possibilities for the players. Whereas for a novel, you want to lock things down and make the plot more constrained and more certain. But yeah, I then wrote up this fantasy novel, partly for my own entertainment. I sort of started writing it one day and finishing it when my wife said, "We finished something for actually finally finish one of your novels as opposed to starting a new one," because I had 5 or 6 ones that had gotten to 10,000 words and been abandoned. And I finished it, and I was going to self-publish it eventually. And then I sent it off to an agent, and the agent said, "Oh, well, I'll take you on and shop this around." And suddenly I had a novel deal. And they're going, "Oh, wow, that was surprising and rather wonderful."
Yeah, that is amazing. And that first novel was called The Gutter Prayer, right?
That's it. Yeah,
yeah.
The Gutter Prayer. It's the first book in the Black Iron Legacy.
Yes.
Books.
Could you tell us a little about The Gutter Prayer and maybe what the Black Iron Legacy is?
The Gutter Prayer is a tale of 3 thieves in this fantastical sort of steampunk-esque city, only less steam and more alchemy. It's this weird, almost sort of surreal metropolis with Lovecraftian ghouls, and the police have been mostly replaced by these wax golems called Tallow-men. And it's a neutral city in the midst of this raging gods war, where basically the gods have gone mad and are basically tearing large chunks of biology apart to throw at each other. But our 3 thieves are, at the start of the novel, largely unaware of that and are off on what seems to be a minor heist, but which quickly escalates into this plot that ricochets from the streets and alleyways up into the highest echelons of the city and down to the depths, and involves ancient forbidden magics and lots of intrigue and backstabbing and conspiracies.
What maybe were some of your inspirations, or kind of what were you drawing from? I mean, you kind of mentioned Cthulhu and stuff, but what were some of your inspirations as you were writing?
I mean, in some ways, the novel was almost a sort of cross-section of my gaming experience and interests. Because there's large chunks are inspired by real world history and places. Like the city of Guerdon in the novel is sort of a cross of London, Cork, Edinburgh, and New York. Many of the monsters are either Lovecraftian or inspired by D&D ideas I had. There are loads of D&D references in there. Like one of the major supporting characters is this Saint Helena, who's this sort of kick-ass veteran adventurer, and her name, as anyone who's played the original Redbox D&D, was the cleric who was killed by Bargle the Infamous back in the original Redbox Choose Your Adventure sample play. One of the major sort of aspects of the novel is the way that it sort of bounces from street level action to political intrigue and conspiracies and magical stuff, and then runs off to delve into the history of the city and so forth. One great thing about role-playing games is you can sort of approach a topic from any angle, depending on who the players are and what they're interested in. And I sort of wanted to keep that sort of that breadth of vision in the novel, where instead of going for a close focus on one particular aspect of the city, I can sort of spread my wings and look at how one event echoes through multiple social areas and aspects of the place. What else?
Well, then you've also published a second one as well, right?
Yep, The Shadow Saint, which is the sequel. There's a third one just finished there, and there will hopefully be a 4th and 5th.
Okay.
And The Shadow Saint is set nearly a year after the Gutter Prayer. And one of the secondary characters from the Gutter Prayer becomes the main protagonist of the Shadow Saint. And again, that's This one is a bit more focused on the politics of the city and on the Gods War Beyond. You've got spies from the various factions in the war moving into the city because of the events of the first book, and all conspire against each other. It's basically attempted to write a sort of Le Carré-esque thriller in the fantasy genre.
Oh, that's fantastic. So then you have a third one and you're that's coming, and then you are planning like a fourth and a fifth one and so on?
That's the current plan. The third one is definitely out in January next year.
Okay.
The title is still not announced yet, so I won't say it officially yet. But yeah, it will be out, and it involves a dragon-based mafia, or mafia-based dragons, if you want to put it that way. It's the Godfather, if Smog was the Godfather. Vengeful gods, and sort of William Gibson was if instead of AIs you had sorcery and golems.
I mean, they sound fantastic. How are you juggling the novels and your role-playing game work?
Poorly. No, I mean, the great thing about actually having a novel contract was that I could stop treating the novels as a sort of indulgent hobby, because when you're a freelancer, the time money equation becomes very, very, very simple. Like, time you spend at your desk is time you're earning money. So anything you do that isn't sitting at your desk typing feels like it's not earning money. And because you don't earn that much from freelancing in the first place, you want to spend as much time as you can to maximize your return. Mm-hmm. So the novel was mostly written at in chunks at 7 a.m. Before the kids go to school, or late at night. So I was able to when I actually had a contract, I was able to switch things around. So basically drop some freelancing work that I stopped looking for as much freelancing work as I had been looking for, and slotted novel stuff in there. But I'm trying to juggle both at the moment, and I intend to keep on working in the role-playing industry for a while anyway. Mm-hmm. Unless Hollywood comes calling, in which case, screw.
In which case, you drop everything, right?
Depends on how big the dump truck of money is, but
yeah,
it's a moderate dump truck of money. I'll drop everything.
Well, yeah, I think everybody has their price that they're looking for. I bet.
Well, I mean, even Tolkien himself said art or cash. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be amazing if Hollywood came calling and wanted to.
Yeah, I'm not relying on it.
Yeah, it's not a good business model, but
I've already made poor business decisions in this whole writing as a career job, writing as a career arc. So I think I'll be sensible from now on.
I would love to see him on the screen the way you're describing him. So they would be amazing. But I guess I'm thinking, so many people, including myself, want to write a novel one day. Do you have any kind of key piece of advice for writing a novel?
You finish it is a ridiculous piece of advice, but it is very, very true. I mean, I wrote 5 or 6 abortive novels where I'd write the first bit, get bored, decide it wasn't very good, and move on to the next shiny thing. Mm-hmm. And when I'm writing role-playing material, in most cases, the commitment to one particular idea or plotline, it doesn't have to last that long. Like, a role-playing book tends to be made up of lots and lots of discrete sections. For a core book, you've got the skills chapter, the character creation chapter, the equipment chapter, the GMing chapter. And if one of those isn't working, you can sort of go back and fix that fairly quickly. And you don't feel that the whole thing has to be abandoned. Whereas with a novel, because it's all one story, it requires a lot more sort of commitment to your ideas. You have to sort of stick with it. And I found certainly that I was just abandoning novels and starting something new in the hopes that I would have that sort of confidence throughout. But yes, this story is definitely working. And I found that no novel works that way. There's always this sort of crash about a third of the way through or halfway through, where you're going, this is all terrible, this is useless, I should just quit this. And you have to fight that urge and finish the thing, because once it's finished, you can see the structure of it and go back and fix it and improve it. But if you abandon it halfway through, you'll never get to that point where you can sort of see the shape of the thing or the shape of the thing where it needs to be, the shape of the thing as it is now, and how to get from how to sort of hammer it into the correct shape. Whereas with a role playing game, I would say they're so modular you can sort of pull out the bits that aren't working and fix them on their own. So it feels like less of a commitment, basically. Yeah. So finish the novel and then you can sort of fix it, as opposed to it's less iterative design. Like with the role playing game, you sort of get your outline, do a quick sketch of the mechanics, play it, hit the table once, you go back, fix it, rewrite it, try again. You can sort of keep on polishing it, improving different small bits of it. Whereas a novel, you need to have the whole thing in some form before you can really start fixing it and seeing what works, what doesn't. So finish the novel and then fix it, as opposed to try and fix it in its entirety as you're writing it.
No, I think that is fantastic advice. I think, I know in my personal experience, you write 5,000, 10,000 words and you somehow get fascinated with like fixing those things, and then you just set it aside because it's been, too long, it's too long or something. And then,
the next shiny idea has come along, or you just sort of loathe it. But you have to sort of stick to it and just grind it out. Yeah. And
I think you touched on some things there as well. It's just while doing other work that actually provides for my family and things, it's always hard to then say, why am I still working on this novel when, I'm struggling so hard and it's taking up time because it's not providing me anything, Yeah. And so it's always easier to default back to, some role-playing game stuff or something like that, at least for me.
Well, definitely, you have to be simultaneously selfish and going I'm going to write this for myself because I want to make it done, and also true to yourself, going you can't go and have fun, you can't go and sleep. Yeah. Basically, my advice for writing a novel is become mildly split personality, abuse yourself until it's done.
No, I can definitely see that, because that was kind of my process when I started Dice Geeks and started doing some, writing my role-playing game books. It was just, I had a full-time job then and everything, and it was just like, well, I'm going to have to do these at, 5 a.m. I'm going to have to do these until midnight after dinner. I'm going to have to do these on the weekends, or it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. You have to make time. That often involves sort of carving out of your life with a bloody knife.
Do you outline the novels, or do you what did they call it? A pantser, I guess.
What I've discovered my sort of approach seems to be is have a rough outline, write a few thousand words, then do another outline, then write a bit more. I find the novel having the outline helps me that I'm not writing to avoid and babbling and not actually making progress on the plot. But at the same time, because I'm so experienced with role-playing games, I will often have characters do unexpected things or spot some connection or some plot element that I want to develop that it wasn't in the original outline. So sticking to the outline I don't think I could stick to I could write an outline at the start and then stick to it the whole way through. I need to have that sort of structure with flexibility, as opposed to being completely flexible or completely structured.
No, that makes sense.
That works for me. It works at the moment. Every novel is very, very different, even more so than every role-playing game.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. And I have interviewed a number of guests who have written novels. I have yet to interview somebody who says they write by the seat of their pants. Everybody says that they outline. So I think that's probably also some good advice for anybody out there who is wanting to write a novel, that you should have at least a little bit of a blueprint or plan in mind.
I mean, I know people who do pants entire novels, and I don't know how their brains work. I suspect there's a level of subconscious design going on there that they are somehow have the confidence to rely on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that they have it in their mind already. Yeah, and they're able to hold it there. Yeah. Well, Gareth, I could keep asking you questions about this, but I've kept you here for quite a while. Where can people learn more about you and your work online?
If you go to garhanrahan.com, there's a blog there which gets updated at least once a year. There's also a free one-shot role-playing game set in the Black Iron Legacy world so we can get a taste of many things I've done. Online, the easiest place to find me, the place I'm most active, is Twitter, where I'm at Mytholder, MYTHOLDER, and I've used that same handle for 20 years, so I'm not going to change it now, despite it being hard to spell and terrible for search engines, but I'll stick with it.
Well, and then I will be sure to link your website and your Twitter and also your novels and some of your role-playing game books in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who's listening can head over there and they'll find the show notes for this episode, and they will see links to your novels, to some of your role-playing game books, as well as your website and your Twitter. So Gareth, just thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you. It was lovely. Thank you very much.
All right, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Gareth. As I mentioned, I have linked up his novels and a number of the games that he has worked on and written for in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. You want to head over there and check those out right now. Now, guys, hey, if you want something for free, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You'll get 10 free dungeon maps. You'll never miss an episode of this show. And each and every Friday, you'll get an email update from me talking about what I am working on at dicegeeks.com. Now, guys, if you really enjoy this show, and I hope that you do, I am trying to get better all the time on the microphone and in other technical aspects. I'm also trying to search out the best guests that I can find, and I'm also really just working on my skills as an interviewer, trying to get better all the time. So if you like this show, please consider supporting it in some way. You can like it, review it, rate it, share it, tell a friend about it. You can also support it financially at patreon.com/dicegeeks. That would mean the world to me. Now, I thank you so much for listening today, and until next time, keep gaming.